It's time to check off another early Reliving the War pay-per-view as we're going to look at the 1996 Great American Bash, taking place on June 16th inside the Baltimore Arena, a venue where this very event had taken place from 1988 to 1991. Our main event sees the Giant putting his WCW World title on the line against Lex Luger, but the main draw for this show was seeing the team of Ric Flair and Arn Anderson taking on Steve McMichael and Kevin Greene, two American football players. We'll also see the invading Scott Hall and Kevin Nash on the show tonight as Eric Bischoff confronts the two men regarding their plans for WCW. But we're going to kick things off with some tag team action as the Steiner brothers take on the team of Fire and Ice, Scott Norton and Ice Train. Before we get to the in-ring action, we have to sit through the customary playing of the American National Anthem. It's one thing I never really understood as someone outside of the US, so I'm genuinely curious as to why this seems to be the done thing at sporting events specifically. Wrestling also has that stigma of not being a real sport, so yeah, why? These two teams have been locking horns a fair bit recently without crowning a decisive winner, so there must be a victor in this matchup at the Bash. Rick and Scott get a great ovation as they make their way down to the ring, and we start off with sizable Father Pump in the Frosty Express. He may be cold as ice, but he's not willing to sacrifice. Ice Train gets the early advantage with an arm drag and a hip toss before showing off some athleticism with a leapfrog. Scotty gets run over with a clothesline, but he answers with a hip toss of his own, and when Norton comes in, he gets taken down by Rick. Fire and Ice are forced to regroup as the Steiners do their signature pose inside the ring. The partners now come in, and Rick takes a few shots in the corner before getting taken down with a clothesline. The DFG answers with one of his own though, and then he takes Norton down with a belly-to-belly suplex. Scotty comes back in with a dropkick, but Norton answers with a Samoan drop. These four big men are working at a great pace here in the early going, but Scott seems to be favouring his shoulder as Ice Train comes back in. Steiner remains on the back foot as Choo Choo scores with a couple of suplexes and a big running splash in the corner, though Scott gets back into it when connecting with a belly-to-belly of his own. Norton comes in, he nearly gets dropped right on his head from another throw attempt from Scotty, so yeah, it's all go here and this is good. Steiner then goes for a crossbody off the top rope, but Flash catches him out and he puts him down with a power slam. Unreal strength from Big Scott Norton. We slow things down for the first time in the match as Ice Train pops on a devastating chin lock. Big Papa Pump digs deep while fighting out, but he soon wishes he hadn't as Norton scores with a shoulder breaker before slapping on an armbar to work over that injured shoulder. Rick comes in trying to break it up, but Flash keeps it applied, for he is a double hard bastard, you see, and he fears no dog-faced gremlin. Rick's able to make a blind tag as Norton hits a second shoulder breaker, and boom, Steiner line from Rick. Rick works over both members of Fire and Ice before all four men get in the ring. Scott gets sent out to the floor, and Fire and Ice hit a powerbomb splash combo, but the Steiners stay in it. Rick and Scott then hit their Doomsday Bulldog, but their pin attempt also gets broken up. And our match comes to an end soon after as Scotty scores with a pretty ropey looking Frankensteiner on Flash Norton for the pinfall win. The Steiner brothers win our opening match, and I really enjoyed this one. A hard-hitting encounter which hardly ever slowed down. A fine start to the 1996 Great American Bash. Backstage, Mean Gene's with Jimmy Hart and Kevin Sullivan, and Jimmy says that the Dungeon of Doom doesn't need the Horsemen or anybody else. You may want to retract that statement there, my guy. Sullivan says that his upcoming match with Chris Benoit isn't about the Dungeon of Doom versus the Horsemen, but it's about Sullivan, Flair and Anderson. Kevin says he got rid of one horseman, Brian Pillman, by showing the world he was a quitter, and he'll do the same to Benoit tonight, because while Chris is no quitter, he's also not a horseman, and he'll do Flair and Anderson a favour by ridding them of Benoit later on tonight. Up next, the US title's on the line as Konnan defends against El Gato. Who the hell's this lad? Turns out it's Pat Tanaka in his finest We Have Tiger Mask at Home cosplay, but seriously, how the hell are they getting away with this? US champion Konnan makes his way to the ring with a mask that looks even worse, but at least it's his own. Randy Elder shows off both the US title and his remarkable hair and mustache combo as the bell rings to kick us off. Dusty Rhodes spouts absolute bollocks on commentary as the two exchange holds before our feline friend takes Konnan down with a dragon screw. Gato keeps the advantage with some kicks and an arm drag takedown before Konnan returns the favour with one of his own, this time springing off the ropes. He then turns the challenger inside out with a clothesline, proving that cats don't always land on their feet, but he gets sent to the mat himself via a savate kick from the El Gato capture card. A crucifix submission keeps the champion grounded. He is able to fight back to his feet but goes right back down after a powerbomb from Pat the Cat Tanaka. Somebody call his mama. The men then exchange submission holds on the canvas as the action slows down, although it does pick up with a bulldog from Konnan followed by his signature Rolling Thunder lariat. We go outside briefly, but El Gato gets caught coming back in. Konnan flips over the ropes to deliver a sunset powerbomb onto the floor, and back in the ring, El Gato tries a float over in the corner, but he gets caught and planted with an Alabama slam. This gives Konnan the pin and the win, retaining his US title in the process. An okay match that was a bit sloppy here and there, but nothing offensive. Konnan keeps his gold and El Gato's resigned to the litter tray of time as he would never appear on WCW television ever again. What a pussy. Mean Gene Okerlund's with the Stinger backstage, and Gene refers to Sting's upcoming opponent, Lord Steven Regal, as a sissy and a prissy boy. I mean, go ahead Gene, say what you really feel. Sting sort of agrees with Okerlund as he takes the piss out of how Regal drinks his tea, and he wonders if that's how they breed the boys over there in England, because that's not how American men are bred. Big talk from a man who wears face paint, dyes his hair bleach blonde and wears neon spandex for a living, but anyway. He then says he's taken nothing away from Regal as a wrestler, but he's going to straighten him out tonight at the Great American Bash. Right now though, Diamond Dallas Page puts his Battle Bowl ring on the line against Marcus Alexander Bagwell. Page calls out these Baltimore bimbos and he says that after they see DDP, they'll forget all about some fella named Cal Ripken. No idea who this is. Calvin Edwin Ripken, nicknamed the Iron Man, is an American former baseball shortstop. Okay, don't care, moving on. Bagwell comes out to his magnificent American Males theme song, but we barely get to hear it as he sprints to the ring to get his hands on Page. Dallas bails to the outside before blindsiding Bagwell from behind to take the early advantage. DDP gets in a few shots at the ropes, but Marcus brings Page over the top to the floor and we get a brief scrap on the outside. Bagwell sends Page over the guardrail and into the front row, and back in the ring, Buff Daddy stays in control with a crossbody before locking in an armbar. Bagwell continues to work Dallas's arm before rocking Page with a forearm that sends him into the ropes. Bagwell brings his opponent to the floor with a dropkick, and Dallas gets no time to recover as Marky Mark comes flying at him with a plancha. Buff heads upstairs, but Page cuts him off and Marcus gets his little American Male dropped on the turnbuckle. Dallas chokes Bagwell on the mat and then on the ropes before taking his opponent down with a back elbow and a pretty rough looking gut wrench backbreaker. He continues to work over the midsection with an abdominal stretch. It stays applied for a good long while until Bagwell's able to hip toss his way out of the hold, but Marcus goes down once again following a pancake from DDP. It only gets a 2. Page does his customary banana peel bump when going for a kick, which allows Bagwell to connect with a pair of atomic drops and a slingshot clothesline, which gets him a near fall of his own. There's a head scissor takedown from Bagwell, not a move we have ever really seen him do, before he goes for a fisherman suplex. Dallas is able to hold on to the ropes to block it, and he catches Bagwell with a diamond cutter for the 1-2-3. It is pretty amazing looking back at this time to see where both of these guys would be in just a year from now, but as for a match in 1996, it really wasn't anything to write home about. Nothing wrong with it, it just didn't really grab me the same way as the opener did. Still, Diamond Dallas Page holds on to the Battle Bowl ring and the Great American Bash rolls on. Mean Gene's with Jimmy Hart and WCW champion The Giant. Gene asks Jimmy where his association lies, seeing as he's now aligned with the Dungeon of Doom but also with Lex Luger. And Jimmy says everyone's been worried about that very situation. I, for some reason, doubt that very much. Jimmy, however, says he isn't worried at all, and yeah, you didn't really answer the question here, did you? Gene then asks the champ if he's worried about the torture rack, to which the Giant basically says, nah mate, not really, I'm fucking massive. Time for our second title match of the night as Dean Malenko defends his Cruiserweight title against the debuting Rey Mysterio Jr. History in the making, folks. We are joined on commentary by Mike Tenay, who runs down the credentials of Ray Jr. as he makes his way to the ring. Out comes the Iceman, and Tenay says the two men's nicknames will set the stage for this match: the Man of 1,000 Holds against the Human Highlight Reel. Both men share some back and forth momentum with a few holds before they both kip up and square up to each other. So Malenko takes Ray down to the canvas before Mysterio gets to the ropes to break the hold. The pace quickens as both men avoid each other's attacks. Ray's able to send Dino Machino to the floor following a tilt-a-whirl arm drag. The newcomer then prevents Malenko from getting back inside the ring with a springboard dropkick, and Dean takes a moment to compose himself before getting back inside. Once again, the two men exchange the advantage before Dean rolls through on a pin attempt and he catapults Ray over the top to the floor. Ray is able to use his quickness to avoid Malenko's follow-up baseball slide, and the two men reset once again. Malenko goes to work on the arm of Mysterio and he begins to zone in on the body part with a hammerlock into a body slam. The champion lives up to his moniker by working over the arm while looking to ground the high flyer. Ray escapes to the outside. Dean follows him and does some damage by using the guardrail to his advantage. Mysterio is able to connect with another springboard dropkick back inside to cause some separation, but Malenko uses his rare size advantage to run Mysterio over with a clothesline. Back to the mat we go as Dino applies an armbar before getting back to his feet and draping Ray's arm over the top rope before connecting with a dropkick. The champion has one focus right now, making sure that the challenger is unable to use that left arm, so he hammerlocks the arm once again. But this time he drops Ray down with a backdrop before going back to the armbar on the canvas. Ray's able to get a break when he backflips over Malenko and he scores with a dropkick, but Dino's right back on him with more heavy focus on the arm. It may not be the most exciting cruiserweight title match you've ever seen, but it really is impressive the number of different ways that Malenko can work over a single body part. He does switch it up with a surfboard, and his subsequent pin attempt gets him a near fall. Malenko then locks in a modified Kimura back on the mat as the fans are waiting for the high flyer to break out and quicken the pace. Dean does this himself though as he drops Ray with both a back suplex and a butterfly suplex, but neither move gets the job done. So he once again goes back to the arm, and yeah, you gotta admit it is starting to get a bit wearisome at this point. After a while, both men get back up and Ray's able to send Malenko spilling to the outside before taking to the air with a flipping springboard senton to the floor. Another springboard dropkick back inside gets Ray a near fall before both men share a sequence of 2 counts, culminating with a springboard head scissors for another 2. This has all livened the crowd up quite a bit, by the way. It looks like that arm of Rey Mysterio's just fine despite all the punishment, but nonetheless, Ray heads up top and he scores with a Frankensteiner to the champion before countering Dean's tilt-a-whirl attempt into yet another near fall. Ray goes for another head scissors, but it gets countered into a powerbomb, and with his feet on the ropes, Malenko is able to retain his cruiserweight gold. A fine match to show off the difference in styles between the two. I know it's also an extremely important match for the man many consider to be the greatest luchador in wrestling history, but they could have easily cut a good 5 minutes off of this one. The two would go on to have much better matches, but yeah, as a first time encounter, it was still pretty good. Mean Gene's earning his wage tonight. He's now with TV and tag team champion Sexy Lex Luger backstage, and Lex says that WCW requested this interview. Out of respect, Lex is here in body but not in mind because he's focused on the Giant, and he's not going to yell and scream about what he's going to do in the match. He does tell the world champion that he's not invincible. He will make a mistake, and when he does, that's when Lex will capitalize and bring home the world championship. Look at big ol' Lex Luger actually coming up with a game plan for this match. You're not fooling anyone, mate. Up next, oh boy, it's Big Bubba of the Dungeon of Doom taking on John Tenta, a former member of that faction. Bubba shaved half of Tenta's hair as punishment for leaving the dungeon, and Big John's kept it that way as motivation. God love him though, he didn't have much to begin with, the poor fella. The two lads scrap on the floor to kick things off, and Bubba gets sent into the ring steps. Back in the ring, Tenta uses his big fists in the corner before using his arse in the corner, and Bubba's on the back foot in the early going. Jimmy screams at Bubba to get up, and incredibly, his shill encouragement seems to work as Bubba knocks Tenta down with a loaded right hand, even though the camera misses what the object was that he had in his hand. He hands whatever it was off to Jimmy, and when referee Nick Patrick goes to check, he finds nothing on Bubba. Sneaky bastard. Bubba then shows off his agility with an enziguri and a trifecta of running teabags before sliding out to the floor to deliver another right hand. He tries to use the ropes on a pin attempt, but Patrick sees it. It's about time he saw something in this match. But that just means Bubba's gonna revert to some semi-legal cheating by wrapping Tenta's leg around the ring post. He stays on the injured body part before straight up choking Tenta with his boot. John then misses a corner charge and gets put back down with a back body drop. Bubba tells Jimmy to get ready with the scissors as he heads up top. And Jimmy, the idiot, is too busy jaw-jacking with the fans to notice Bubba getting caught out and planted with a power slam. This, in turn, allows Tenta to pick up the victory. John grabs the scissors and he threatens to cut Jimmy's glorious locks. Bubba looks to put a stop to it, but heel buffoonery leads to Jimmy going down and Bubba ends up getting his beard cut. So yeah, of all the wrestling matches that have ever taken place, this was certainly one of them. Gene's now going to ask for overtime. He's backstage once again, this time with the football lads and their better halves. Old Stevie Boy's fired up when he says there's no game plan tonight, they're just coming to get Flair and Arn at the Great American Bash. Big Kev meanwhile says he's, and I quote, coming hard and coming heavy. He must be very excited to be on a WCW pay-per-view. Their trainer Randy Savage saunters into frame to say that the smell of winning is in the air, and a little perfume too. He says this is the winning team, and the lads leave in a wave of testosterone and an unholy amount of cocaine, one can only assume. Speaking of illegal substances, it's Chris Benoit up next as he takes on Kevin Sullivan in a Falls Count Anywhere match. It's the Horsies versus the Doomers as Kevin Sullivan power walks to the ring only to be completely wiped out by a Benoit clothesline on the floor. The lads continue to scrap in the aisleway before making their way down to the ringside area where they continue to exchange punches and chops. Over the railing and into the humanoids we go as both Benoit and Sullivan make their way up the stairs towards the top of the building. They finally make their way up the steps and into the concourse where they venture into the men's room. A staple in Benoit vs Sullivan matches, they just love fighting each other in the shitter. A couple of lads have their toilet time interrupted as Benoit gets a door slammed on his head by the Taskmaster. They seem to have attracted quite a crowd, but fear not civilians, Doug Dillinger's on the case. Benoit gets the door slammed on his head again before tumbling to the piss-sodden floor, which is a bit grim, let's be honest. He fights back with some punches and bunches, but a thumb to the eye slows him down, before Sullivan tries to stick Chris's head into a urinal. We're spared that particular image, and this time it's the Taskmaster getting a door slammed into him. Dusty is then both confused and excited by the fact that a lady has made her way into the men's bathroom. Maybe she snuck in through this hatch that Sullivan's trying to put Chris into, or maybe this is her thing, getting her jollies off in the big boys' room. Back into the concourse we go as Benoit gets bopped with a bin while Tony says on commentary how Pillman ran off with his tail between his legs after fighting Sullivan at Super Brawl. Not strictly true, but never mind that. Tony's broadcast partner Dusty wants them to go across the way to the women's bathroom. These two men are not the same. Sullivan and Benoit continue to exchange punches before heading back down the steps and back to the ringside area. Not before Benoit gets his little Wolverine smashed on the steel guardrail, of course. He does eventually return the favour as Kevin's little Taskmaster also takes the brunt of the guardrail, and Benoit takes this opportunity to grab a table from under the ring. It gets set up in the ring and both men end up feeling the wood. Easy now. Before Benoit places the table across the top rope. He charges in but gets backdropped onto his own creation, and Sullivan follows him up to the top, but it all goes wrong as Benoit hooks him and delivers a superplex off the table to the mat. This is enough for Benoit to get the pinfall win. Just as Chris looks to lay in a post-match beatdown, Arn Anderson makes his way down to the ring and he pulls Benoit off of Kevin Sullivan. Remember, we've got an alliance between Arn Anderson and Flair and Sullivan in the Dungeon of Doom. But, swerve bro. Anderson kicks Sullivan in the ribs and both he and Benoit lay in the boots as the crowd goes wild. The Dungeon of Doom come out and so Benoit and Arn scarper and they make their way back up the ramp. So while it wasn't the most eventful Falls Count Anywhere match you'll ever see, I still thought it was entertaining, mainly due to Dusty spouting absolute bollocks on commentary. Back we go to Mean Gene and he's alongside Woman and Liz. Before he can perv in peace, he's joined by Arn, Flair, Benoit and Bobby Heenan. Arn says that there have been those who thought they were worthy of being a horseman, but Benoit earned that right tonight. He then tells Sullivan that the two factions are now at war. Benoit says that he warned Taskmaster what would happen if he messed with the Horsemen, and now he's put Sullivan in his place once and for all. Flair then tells Greene and McMichael to get a good look at what's in store for them tonight, including the mind behind the muscle, Bobby the Brain Heenan. Brain says that he's not scared of Savage and that he's a man that can stand on his own 2 feet, all while stumbling over his words and looking absolutely terrified. It's now time for the sissy and prissy Lord Steven Regal to square off with the man called Sting. His lordship's looking to scrap with anyone and everyone as he makes his way down to the ring, whereas the Stinger's the complete opposite, slapping hands with the fans and looking awfully happy to be here. This whole feud started with Regal claiming he was being overlooked by WCW and he was better than any American wrestler, even referring to Sting by name. And during the contract signing for the match on the June 2nd episode of Main Event, Regal slapped Sting in the face, adding some fuel to the fire going into the Bash. Sting wastes no time going after Regal right from the get-go, laying in some punches and kicks before sending Stevie over the top to the outside. His lordship gets thrown into the guardrail before getting backdropped onto the floor. Regal begs off when they get back inside the ring, but he catches Sting with a thumb to the eye before going on the attack with some European uppercuts. How appropriate. The fans inside the Baltimore arena chant USA as Regal applies a headlock, and the power of America seems to fire Sting up as he breaks free and he takes Regal down with a Japanese arm drag. Regal rolls out to the floor and he gets into it with the fans at ringside before getting back in and extending his hand to his opponent like a true gentleman. Old Regal doing his bit for cross-community relations here. Good on him. Sting instead decides to thrust at Regal in response. Regal looks as befuddled as I do watching it. Like, imagine doing that at the end of a job interview or meeting your partner's dad for the first time ever. Anyway, Regal shows off his technical ability by taking Sting down to the mat, but the Icon responds by showing off his power advantage, though technique will always triumph over brawn as Regal kips up and he locks in a Cobra Clutch. Regal stays in control with some more uppercuts before laying the boots into his downed opponent. He continues to keep Sting grounded with a modified half Nelson, which stays applied for quite some time, and when Sting's able to make it to his feet, he gets sent right back down with a dropkick. Regal continues to keep the Stinger on the back foot while talking some smack into the camera, and even though Sting does fight out momentarily with a backdrop, Regal regains control by working over the arm back on the canvas before grinding his elbow into the side of Sting's head. Regal then uses the ropes for leverage when he has a key lock applied, and if I'm honest, and as much as I love Regal, this type of offense would probably have been more effective on this card if we hadn't just seen Dean Malenko do a very similar thing earlier in the night. This rings true again when Regal starts working over the arm of the Stinger as the fans try to get behind their hero and help him back into the match. Sting's barely gotten any offense in throughout the entire bout, and we're coming towards the end of it as he gets back to his feet and finally he starts to fire up on his opponent with a dropkick and a few clotheslines. His flurry gets cut short when he heads up top and he gets cut off by Regal, who takes him off the ropes with a butterfly suplex before locking in his signature Regal stretch. Despite all the damage that Regal's done with various holds throughout the match, Sting refuses to give up and Sting breaks the hold in frustration. He tries laying in a few more shots in the corner, but the Stinger finally begins to sting up and he returns the favour by dropping Regal to the mat with a number of punches. His Stinger splash gets countered, but he's able to come back with a back body drop before applying the deathlock. Regal gives it up and Sting wins at the Great American Bash. Two of my absolute favourites, but I can't really recommend this one. Again, it wasn't bad, but it followed a similar format to the Cruiserweight title match that had taken place just half an hour earlier. It's time for our semi-main event, the team of Kevin Greene and Steve McMichael taking on Ric Flair and Arn Anderson. Michael Buffer builds this one as the legends of the gridiron taking on the legends of the squared circle. The fans certainly seem up for it as the Horsemen make their way down to the ring first, alongside Woman and Liz, with Coach Bobby Heenan getting his own introduction. I do really like this addition of Heenan to the Horsemen, just fits the whole faction like a glove in my opinion. Out next are the football lads, and look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know anything about American football and how good these lads were on the field. I only know McMichael from being in WCW, and outside of Kevin Greene's fleeting appearances in the company, I wouldn't have been able to pick this guy out of a lineup. I know both were well respected in football, but tonight they're both in the domain of pro wrestling, so let's judge them solely on how they get on in between the ropes. I will say though that this does feel like a big event, and WCW have done a good job of making this match seem important to an outside audience. Ah, there's Randy Savage. I know who that is. Savage has been coaching McMichael and Greene for this bout, and holy shit, I'm seeing double for Macho Man. Tony says on commentary that due to public demand, Randy Savage will be reinstated to wrestle as of tomorrow night on Nitro. Stevie and Kev do whatever this is, and now it's time to get down to business as McMichael and the Enforcer start this one off. Anderson shows Steve up at the opening bell, and yeah, if you're going to have two guys walk two inexperienced football players through a pro wrestling match, you'd be hard pressed to find two better for that task than Ric Flair and Arn Anderson. Steve tries his luck again, but just like before, Anderson gets the better of him. After some words of encouragement from Big Kev, Steve gives it one more try by dropping down to a 3-point stance, and he runs over Double A. And McMichael looks very pleased with himself as Anderson challenges him to do it one more time. This time, the wily veteran outsmarts McMichael by dropping down with a drop toe hold before laying in the boots. McMichael is able to come back with a shoulder tackle off the second rope though, and despite his lack of experience, it's obvious that McMichael at least has a bit of charisma about him. Arn gets in a cheap shot on Kevin, which forces him into the ring, and the two NFL lads go to work on the Enforcer. Their barrage of boots sends him to the outside for a breather. Arn doesn't get much of a chance to regroup though, as here comes Macho dropping him with a right hand. The Horsemen can't talk strategy as McMichael tells Anderson to get back inside the ropes. Arn does, but Steve tags out, and now it's time to see what Kevin Greene can do. Say what you want about this boy, but you can't say he's not intense and he's not ready to go. The Nature Boy tags in. He styles and profiles around the ring before challenging Greene to drop down to the 3-point stance. Greene does, and Flair just puts him in the head, so there's that experience advantage coming into play once again. Flair gets in a few of his signature chops, but Greene uses his power to push Rick away before running him down with a shoulder tackle, and then he gives Anderson one as well. The Horsemen are sent to the floor once again, and Kevin decides to mimic Flair's strut, which makes the Nature Boy go so mad that he runs up the ramp. He doesn't make it very far though, as Macho's right there to jump him from behind and bring him right back down to the ring. Rick gets caught in the lights following a back body drop, and he goes down again following a few clotheslines. Steve comes in and he scares Arn off before going face to face with the Nature Boy. Rick tries to knock McMichael down, which doesn't go very well, so he just kicks him in the gut instead before lighting up Steve's chest with a few chops. These seem to have no effect on the big man, and so he delivers some chops of his own before taking Rick down with a bail out of the corner, and he follows this up with a back body drop. Flair begs off before poking Steve in the eye to gain control, although when he decides to go up top, typical results ensue and McMichael sends Flair flying off the top rope to the mat. There's a figure 4 from Stone Cold Steve McMichael, and the crowd goes absolutely wild. He genuinely applies it better than a lot of full-timers, so fair play to him. Big sexy Kevin Greene wants to get in on the act, so he pops on the same move to the Enforcer, and things are now looking bleak for the Horsemen. Woman goes to Steve's eyes to break up the hold, which causes the ladies at ringside to scream at one another before they all make their way back up the ramp. This distraction allows Flair and Arn to gain the advantage, and they look to single out Steve and wear him down. The Horsemen take turns in getting their licks in on McMichael, and when he tries to fight back, Flair goes between the posts with a low blow. Big Steve continues to take a beating at the hands of the Horsemen until an atomic drop sends Arn into Flair, and McMichael is then able to make the tag to Kevin. Greene fires up on both opponents, and he even takes Flair down with a power slam. We've got Rick trying to go up and over in the corner. He gets met with a big boot from Steve, but after delivering a suplex, Arn gets Kevin from behind with a chop block. Now it's Greene who's going to get worked over by Flair and Arn. The Horsemen focus their attacks on the knee of the Carolina Panther. Flair locks in his patented figure 4, and Kev's in trouble right about now, especially when Arn's helping apply additional leverage, but Macho's there to break things up. That is, until Chris Benoit appears from the back and the Crippler and the Macho Man get into it on the outside. Kevin is still locked in the figure 4 as we cut to the stage to see Deborah McMichael return to ringside. But now she's in an evening dress, and she's alongside Liz and Woman, who are carrying a briefcase, a somewhat magical briefcase. Deborah opens the case to reveal a Horseman shirt and a whole heap of cash. Steve has a long think about what to do while Kevin Greene's reversed the figure 4 and he can see all this going on. Steve decides screw it and he whacks his partner with the case, and this allows Flair to roll over and get the pin and the win. After the bell, Steve squares off with the Macho Man before he gets taken out by Arn, Flair and Benoit. Savage gets bopped on the noggin with the case, and it seems we have the newest member of the Four Horsemen in Steve McMichael as he puts on the shirt and he shakes the hand of Bobby Heenan. You know what, this was actually a pretty enjoyable match. Those who have followed Reliving the War know I've always found Steve quite endearing as he always seemed to try his hardest in the ring, and Kevin Greene didn't look out of place one single bit. What could have been and what was predicted to be a total disaster actually turned out pretty damn good. But when you've got the likes of Ric Flair and Arn Anderson in the ring guiding you, then that was always going to be the case. Get it? Case? He hit him with a case. Never mind. Eric Bischoff's at the entranceway and he recaps the numerous, as he calls them, interruptions on Nitro involving the former Diesel and Razor Ramon from the WWF. Bischoff asks them to come out onto the stage, and sure enough, Hall and Nash appear and the crowd pops huge for them. There's not many folk that can make double denim look cool, but Scott completely pulls it off. The coolest wrestler to ever grace our TV screens. Eric informs both Hall and Nash that if they want a match, then they've got one. It'll be at Bash at the Beach on July 7th in Daytona Beach, Florida. Eric then asks them to clear up one thing before going any further. He asks both men if they work for the WWF, and they both reply no. This question reflected a real-life lawsuit that was taking place at the time, with the WWF asserting that WCW was guilty of slander, defamation and trademark infringement, and so the WWF tried to get a restraining order to restrict Nash and Hall's appearances on WCW television. It's mad to think that had the WWF managed to get that order filed, then the NWO storyline most likely wouldn't have happened, at least in the way that we know it. Hall wants to know who the three opponents are at Bash at the Beach, but Eric says he'll tell them tomorrow on Nitro. Scott doesn't take too kindly to having that information withheld, so he punches Eric in the gut, which sets him up nicely for Nash to jackknife him from the stage through a table. Tony and Dusty do a good job of selling the severity of the attack as Hall and Nash leave the building. The big man and the medium-sized man have done some serious damage. Eric gets put on a stretcher and Tony leaves the commentary position to check on him. Dusty says that if Hall and Nash do indeed want a war, then there's plenty of guys in that dressing room that will be more than happy to go to war for World Championship Wrestling. And little known fact that was highlighted months later on Nitro, in storyline, Bischoff paid Hall and Nash a visit after the show went off the air, and it was on this night that he decided he was going to align with the NWO. Eric would play the long game and he wouldn't reveal himself as a member until December 96, so if you wanted to be pedantic, you could actually say that Eric was the real third member of the faction. It's time for our main event as the Giant defends the WCW World title against Lex Luger. Luger checks on Eric Bischoff before making his way down to the ring, once again selling the significance of what Hall and Nash have just done. He looks focused though as he waits on his adversary, the World Heavyweight Champion, the Giant. And even the big man and Jimmy Hart take a quick look at Bischoff as they make their way out. Luger tries to rush in at the opening bell, but he gets met with a huge foot to the face from the champ, who then lays in the boots to the down challenger. Lex fights back with a few right hands before sending the Giant over the top rope to the floor, but the big man lands on his feet. Ridiculous athleticism from Paul White. He drags Lex out before pressing him right back into the ring, but the total package stays on his opponent with more right hands when the Giant gets back inside. The challenger jumps on the Giant's back, looking to bring him down with a sleeper hold, and as the referee checks on the champ, Jimmy Hart looks to whack Lex with his megaphone, but he takes too long and Sting comes down to put a stop to the shenanigans. He chases Jimmy Hart to the back as the Giant's able to reverse the sleeper hold and drive Lex into the turnbuckles, leaving Luger in prime position to take a couple of shots in the corner. Lex then gets choked in the opposite corner and the challenger's looking to be outmatched at this point in the bout, especially when he's on the receiving end of a backbreaker before being stretched out across the knee of the Giant. The champion keeps his focus on the back as he puts Luger in an Argentine backbreaker before flinging him down to the mat and stretching him out once again. Luger breaks free with a jawbreaker, but when he tries to pick the Giant up, he buckles under the weight of the champion and he gets flattened like a pancake. Giant continues to work over the back of the total package by standing on him before draping him across the top rope, and he tries to cave in Luger's chest. Lex does get a reprieve when the Giant misses a running attack at the ropes, and he's able to connect with a sort of slingshot dropkick before trying to knock the champion down with clotheslines and forearms. But he only gets results when he decides to go for the knees, and he can now rifle off a few shots to the head. Giant's able to push Lex into the corner, but his splash attempt misses and he finds himself across the top rope. Package tries to lift the big man up for the torture rack, and in fairness to him, he is able to lift the Giant onto his shoulders, but the weight becomes too much and he falls forward with the Giant crashing down on Lex's head. From here, it's academic as the champion takes Luger for a ride with a chokeslam, and that's enough to get the pin and the win. The Giant retains the World Heavyweight title here at the Great American Bash, and that's the end of our show, ladies and gents. Quite a run-of-the-mill main event, honestly, and fans were not really sure who to cheer for, so nothing special. I can't tell you how nice it is to go back to WCW and watch a pay-per-view that doesn't make me want to take a long walk off a short plank. Towards the end of Reliving the War, it was a chore to have to sit through WCW, whether it was Nitro, Thunder or the pay-per-views. So to see the company put on a show that was not only passable but actually really enjoyable was enough to remind me that yes, WCW was once a place where you could actually see logical matches and great action. I do recommend checking this one out because every match fell from the decent to great category, with the only exception really being Big Bubba versus John Tenta, but that one's only 5 minutes long and it's still perfectly serviceable. So there you go, another early Reliving the War pay-per-view is done and dusted. Next time we'll check out one of the missing WWF pay-per-views, so let me know in the comments which one you'd like to see out of the ones we've got remaining. Thank you for watching everyone, I do appreciate it, and please take care.